Okay, today we go into the Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, Canticles. It's known by many different names. It is a book that we don't probably a lot of people don't know a ton about, mainly because a lot of its subject matter is stuff we don't um, talk about much in church, um, and so it is a difficult book to teach because I think it pretty much is talking about love between a man and a woman. But we're going to look at the different things that it is talking about and try to learn some things today about the book. Let's look at the Old Testament book card. Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, as I said, Canticles, and the purpose, and this is the evangelical Christian um, perspective on it, the current thinking, that it is to illustrate the joy of authentic love. This is love between a man and a woman found in marriage. Um, and on that, you think back, what I've asked you before, what is the only institution that we still do that we find in the Bible before the fall of man, before sin came in? What did they do then that we still do? And the answer is marriage. Marriage was decreed and given to mankind in chapter 2 just before sin came in. That's a pretty important thing. Think about that. God didn't give us church. God didn't give us a Savior. Um, God didn't give us the Bible. What did He give us? He instituted marriage as a holy union. I think marriage is the closest we can come to understanding, in human terms, our relationship with God. The closeness of that union of marriage is the closest we approach um, our relationship with God, I think. And so that makes it pretty important. I think God gave mankind marriage knowing that sin was coming as a way to survive, spiritually survive this broken world, this sinful world. And so it's very important. Now, it seems like, thinking about that it is a foundational truth, spiritual, biblically significant thing, marriage, right? Let me ask you, what is the, when we think about the world today, that is, by the world I mean the unbelieving world, the world that does not have a relationship with God, that is actually maybe a little bit antagonistic towards faith and people, spiritual things, and uh, uh, well, not necessarily spiritual things, but definitely antagonistic towards biblical faith. What do they attack? What's one of the things that has come very much under attack in the last 10 years? It's marriage. I don't think that's an accident. And so it makes a lot of sense, noting the significance of marriage as coming before, even before man fell from God, as an important thing, that there would be a book illustrating the joy of authentic love found in marriage. Makes sense that there would be something, though it is subtle. It's in the background, um, and it is something that we don't talk a ton about in church. Their key text is Song of Songs, chapter 8, verse 7, and the one sentence summary. We have a bride and a groom, or a wife and a husband, and some people theorize that they begin as a bride and a groom, as young people looking forward to marriage, and then you have later a husband and wife, and then later a mature couple, celebrate God's wonderful gift of love that they share by describing the different dimensions of their love: physical, emotional, and spiritual. So looking at that key text, it says, many waters cannot quench love, nor can the floods drown it. Thinking of it there metaphorically like a flame, a consuming flame. And I wonder, I had not noticed it before, but talking about a flood, something that was very formative in me that in school, understanding the way ancient people thought, was that idea that they thought before the earth was created, that what existed before, and that was an ocean, the primordial sea. And man could not live in that primordial sea. It was chaos and death. And God brought order to that chaos by bringing the land up so that we could survive, so we could not drown and have food and build houses and things. And then the flood in Noah's time represented a reversal of that, where God allowed the chaos to come back. He lifted his hand from bringing orders. And so I wonder, many waters cannot quench love, nor can the floods drown it. That would go well with saying, marriage was given before sin, and then sin, the chaos, the flood, cannot drown it. It survives. It perseveres in spite of sin. Makes a lot of sense. I had not noted that before. If man could give for love all the wealth of his house, it would be utterly despised. And that's just an ancient way of saying it would not be enough, because love is priceless. Song of Songs, Song of Solomon is perhaps the most difficult and mysterious book in the entire Bible. We will see the various ways that people have tried to deal with it, but in general, people have tried not to deal with it. Have you heard a lot of sermons from the Song of Solomon? I can't remember a single one. Have you been to a ton of Bible studies where they were breaking down the Song of Solomon? Maybe you have. I have not been. We mainly avoid it. So an outline, and this is a possible way to break down the poems. As I say, it is mysterious, and we're a little bit, I think, confused by what its significance is. But one way to break it down would be the first 3 chapters would be the courtship before the young man and the young woman are married. And it's not clear. Some people say there is one man and 2 different women in the Song of Solomon's. Some people think that it's a collection of poems about romantic love, and so there are different people in the different sections of it. It's not clear that it was written speaking of a particular man and a particular woman, and they are the characters throughout. And so in this outline would be that first part, they were fiancés. In the chapters 3 and 4 is a wedding song, kind of describing their union. And then chapters 5 through 8, shedding light on the lasting relationship of things. Now, as you read, we're not going to read a ton of verses from it. Some of them are rather explicit, expressing romantic love between a man and a woman. And that's why church people have, have shied away from it, because that's a little bit embarrassing subject anywhere appropriately. Should be more embarrassing to society than it is, um, because that is a private thing. But certainly in church, it makes people blush, and so we steer away from things that make us blush in church. So here are the interpretations. So try to track with me on this. The first one is allegory. So an allegory is a story that is symbolic. And so an allegory is not meant to be taken as a literal people or literal events, but um, they are meant to symbolize a greater truth than what's happened. And that's, most people deal with this book as an allegory. Now, viewed as an allegory, details of the book are intended to convey hidden spiritual meanings with little importance attached to the normal meaning of the word. So as it describes romantic love between a man and a woman, it's not really talking about that. It's talking about a spiritual relationship, and not, what the words are saying. So, for example, in Jewish tradition, this story is these poems are God's love for Israel is the intended meaning. So God would be the man, Israel would be the female, and it is a symbolic story. That is Jewish tradition. That's how most Jewish people would interpret it. Now, traditionally, Christians have done the same basic thing, except they would nuance it and say this is Christ's love for the church. Rather than God's love for Israel, Christ is the bridegroom, the church is the bride. Now, that certainly has backing from Scripture, doesn't it? Jesus talks in those terms in the New Testament. And so that is not way out in left field. But those would be examples of allegory. Way back to the beginning now, 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, allegory, anything, just about anything that's not a story and a straightforward story in the Bible would be treated as allegory. And even a lot of the straightforward stories might be treated as allegory. So it was a very common way of interpreting things. And we've all grown up with allegory. Preachers often, and I'm making a generalization here, I'm not thinking of anybody in specific, but I know the temptation, there's very much, it's hard to preach without making the Bible into allegory, because, we're not King David and Bathsheba, we're not Moses and the Israelites, but we take essential spiritual truths from what we see in those stories, and we will apply them to situations in our life today. And that's a form of spiritualizing or making the story symbolic. And so it's a common thing that happens. Early Christian church leaders viewed the book as allegory. Origen, for example, he was I think 254 is the date I have. So 254 years after Jesus was born, I think he wrote his first book. He wrote, for example, the beloved is the females, and in chapter 1, verse 5 and 6, she refers to her skin being dark, being a dark-skinned person. Um, he believes that the dark, being dark, means the church, because remember, the Christian view is that the the bride is the church, that the church is dark with sin, that we, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. So it means sin, but she also talks about her loveliness, and her loveliness refers to the spiritual beauty after conversion, after salvation. Um, so you see how that would work, where you were taking what they would say, she refers to her skin being dark. Well, that means she is sin. That is the church being sinful. But then after salvation, we are lovely. Another way that it is viewed, and this is a similar kind of thing, that maybe this is a drama. This was meant to be a play involving either 2 or 3 main characters, um, to kind of explain what's going on. So it is a play, a drama. The problem with that is it would be the only one that we have record of. The Hebrews were not big on making plays, um, and so that would be an odd thing, an unprecedented thing, like a one-time event. A third way we have found by Syrian, I'm pretty sure it's talking about Ugarit. Ugarit's up on the coast of the Mediterranean. Um, we found a cache of tablets there, the cuneiform tablets. I believe they're cuneiform. Might get my writings. Yeah, I believe it's cuneiform. Anyway, finding tablets at Ugarit, a collection of Syrian wedding songs. Um, and so this was a thing in the ancient world. They would sing songs or write poems to be read or acted out at weddings, sung at weddings. Um, and the theory would go that this collection of Syrian wedding songs um, were appropriated probably by Solomon, and he liked them and kept them and adapted them. Also, this is similar, but with a kind of this is a very similar theory, that it is a collection of pagan fertility cult liturgies. So pagan just means polytheistic. All the people around the Hebrews had polytheistic symbols. The world was polytheistic before God revealed himself to the Hebrews, uh, and they wrote the Bible and became part of human history. So pagan fertility cult liturgies means um, they're religious acts and ceremonies that they did for fertility cults. So all the polytheistic um, systems would have a fertility god and a fertility goddess, husband and wife, if you will, and in order to get the god and goddess to bless the people with fertility, um, basically by making it rain so the crops would grow, they would do sexual ceremonies, um, sing sexual songs, do sexual things, dance around, um, do all kind of stuff that we would find very inappropriate, and that this is a collection of um, those things that were in Solomon's collection. I don't really like that theory. Those last two. It is possible. Um, I'm not sure that God would want us to. If that's what it was, I'm not sure that God would want us to put it in the Bible. Would you think? Um, I believe that God has superintended um, the Bible. I don't think the Bible is haphazard. I don't think it's accidental. I think God is watching it and guiding it. I think that Song of Songs is in here for a reason, and 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 I tend to agree with the evangelical take on that. But this is possible. I do know that it was a polytheistic world before the Bible. We think how we do now about God, our common sense, if you will, was not common 3,000 years ago. Um, and a lot of what is in the Bible, at least in the words and ceremonies that they did, how people practiced religion, how people thought about where the gods lived and stuff, has been very influenced by pagan. I mean, the concept of heaven being above us, that's a pagan idea. We all tend to think that, don't we? Weren't we raised that God is above us and he lives up in heaven? Well, that's a pagan idea. I mean, I think really the Bible says God lives everywhere and nowhere. I mean, that God does not have a place that he is. God is spirit that is ubiquitous everywhere. Um, and so we could go on. There's a lot of pagan influences because that was just the way that people thought about the world, the cosmos, the universe. Now, so I don't like that theory. I guess it is possible. Basically, they are saying that Solomon or somebody collected some naughty poems and they just were included in the Bible when it was put up. Now, usually these theories that are kind of anti-Bible theories, are by people that do not think the Bible is inspired by God. So I don't really like that one. Um, I would, this is our modern evangelical perspective. Is not an allegory, not a drama, not a collection of poems, but an intentional anthology of songs. An anthology is a collection of songs extolling, let me see what I have here, human love. And this is human romantic love between a man and a woman. I've said it many times. Let me say very clearly that the Bible, the role of human sexuality, the biblical view is that God gave sexuality to mankind to be between one man and one woman who are married before God, before friends and family, and in the eyes of the law. And that is really the only place. The marriage bed is the only place for sexuality. We are not to do sexual things, think sexual thoughts, view sexual things, read sexual things outside of the marriage bed. That is the biblical view. And so it makes sense, as I said earlier, with marriage being a foundational part of the whole faith Bible thing, makes sense that there would be an intentional book extolling the goodness and the value of human love. There's one further theory that I want to share with you because I think it's interesting. John Selhammer was my Hebrew professor at Southeastern, Old Testament, really a huge influence on me. And he had this theory about it. This is an interesting take. I share it with you because it's interesting. And secondly, to see how you begin using evidence from different places in the Bible to kind of bring together support. And I probably will not do a great job of explaining this, but see if you can follow along. We know that the wisdom literature is a minor part of the Old Testament, but a very important part of the Old Testament for ancient people. We don't think in the terms of virtue and wisdom so much as modern people, but to ancient people, wisdom, living wise lives were extremely important. That is how you show and prove your faith, is by living a virtuous and wise life. And so he believed that he interpreted the book Song of Solomon as the Messiah's, the forecast Messiah's love for Lady Wisdom. Lady Wisdom. So Lady Wisdom is the one that is an idea, a concept of living a wise life. And the Messiah would want us to live this wise life. So the author is intentionally bringing together Israel's messianic hope, the man who is coming to fix things, with divine wisdom, God-inspired, wise, moral life. So this is the scriptural progression of thought, and you'll see, hopefully you can see the connections here. So first we start with the messianic hope, which starts in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. God says to the serpent, after he is giving consequences for the sin, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. The seed of the woman is the Messiah. Notice that it's capitalized there. So the serpent, which is pointing to the concept of Satan, whispering in our ear, telling us to take the shortcut, do the thing that we know we shouldn't, the thing that wisdom is telling us, turn away, don't listen. The serpent is whispering, go ahead and do it. The Messiah is coming to save us from that awful cycle. And he, the Messiah, shall bruise the serpent's head. That means win victory, ultimate victory. And you shall bruise his heel, meaning you will be harmful. You will fight against the Messiah's purposes all the days of your life. So that is the messianic hope. And notice there the woman and her descendant, the Messiah. Then the messianic hope, we go further into David. And so in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 and 13, God says to David, when your days, I think talking through Samuel, when your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, David, one day you're going to pass away, I will set up your seed after you, your descendant, who will come from your body. So this is a genetic descendant for David. This is not a spiritual descendant. God had said that to Abraham. You remember Abraham in Genesis 17, Abraham had waited 12 years, 13 years to have the son that God promised. Well, he had a son through through Hagar, the handmaid, named Ishmael. And Abraham said to God, when God said, you're going to have a baby still, we're not done with that. He said, why don't you just let it be Ishmael? Why don't you just give the blessing to Ishmael and let the Messiah come through Ishmael? God says, no, it will come from you and Sarah, your body and Sarah. It will be a physical descendant. So he's saying the same thing to David here that he had said to Abraham. I will establish his kingdom. He, this descendant, this seed who comes after David, the one in the line of David, will build a house for my name. Now, it sort of sounds like Solomon. We've been through this before, but Solomon is not the forever king. And I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Solomon's kingdom, Solomon's temple was torn down, and about 400 years after Solomon, his descendants failed and there were no more kings. So God is promising somebody other than Solomon. Now in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 21, God says, I will build a house with Jews and Gentiles woven together with Jesus as the cornerstone. And basically, he's talking about salvation through the cross. And so I believe here the Messiah is not Solomon. He's coming down the road later. So then tying that's the Messianic hope, tying it to our quest for wisdom, there's a phrase that comes up, bind wisdom to your heart. And if you remember in Ezekiel and Jeremiah, when God is talking about a new covenant that he's going to make, he said, I will bind it to their heart, this new covenant. Same thing is said of wisdom in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 3. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on a tablet of your heart. In Proverbs 7:2, keep my commandments and live, and my law as the apple of your eye. So that apple, what do you think of when you think of an apple in the Bible? You may think of anything when we talk about an apple. What apple do you know comes to mind?
Eve's apple.
Eve's apple. Keep that in mind. That's where you're supposed to think. Song of Songs, the female, the bride, says to the groom, set me as a seal upon your heart. A lot like the language in Proverbs. As a seal upon your arm. So that bind to your heart. So if it is Lady Wisdom, she is talking to the Messiah, set me as a seal on your heart, as a seal upon your arm. That idea of binding to your heart. Embrace wisdom like a sister. So in Proverbs 7:4, say to wisdom, you are my sister. Keep wisdom always at hand. A close relationship with this. Well, the bride says to the groom in Song of Songs 8:1, oh, that you were like my brother. Then if we are trying to find the identity of the male character, and of course in this idea it is the Messiah, the female says, I awakened you under the apple tree. There's that apple again. There your mother brought you forth. There she who bore you brought you forth. So you came from under the apple tree. And again, remember back to Genesis 3:15, enmity between your seed and her seed. And so figuratively, where was the Messiah born? Under the apple tree, after sin. Going back to Genesis, also tying, as the woman got ready to sin. So the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes. A tree desirable to do what? Make one wise. But this is wisdom that comes from disobeying God rather than wisdom that comes from obeying God. She took the fruit and she ate. She also gave to her husband and he ate. So that the Messiah will be born after this sin. He will be born under the apple tree. That's how this theory goes. Thus, let me get my notes. Thus, the male is the seed capital S-E-E-D, from Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman, the descendant, who will eventually crush sin's head, win a victory over sin. And the female is Lady Wisdom. In the mind of the biblical author, this is an of course union. Of course, the Messiah and the Messiah and Lady Wisdom would be united. Again, this is a very biblical, but this is still an allegory. So I do not try to sway you one way or the other as to the exact purpose of the Song of Songs. I do lean towards the evangelical take that it is to extol human love and marriage, to celebrate it. All aspects of it, even those aspects that we don't generally like, don't feel comfortable talking about in church. Though at first it seems a little strange, on reflection, it is not surprising for God to have included in the biblical canon a book endorsing the beauty and purity of marital love. It really is not. That it's a good thing. It is, think back even further before chapter 2, they get married. In the Genesis 1:26, God created him in his own image. In his own image, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And so, from the very beginning, there is something in the nature of God, in the image of God, that is male and female, and it is meant to be. And what is the quickest way that we divorce ourselves from, as human beings, that we divorce ourselves, that's a pun, an unintentional pun, that we divorce ourselves from the image of God, is we abandon marriage. We abandon marriage. Everybody does what you want. Create your own order of things. God created man and woman and established and sanctioned marriage in Genesis 2, what I just said. Song of Songs, Song of Solomon's, Canticles, whatever you want to call it, is God's endorsement of marital love as wholesome and pure. It is what we are supposed to do. Any questions or thoughts that you have?
It seems almost like in this day and time there's less marriage than there used to be.
I think there's a lot more. Yeah, a lot.
People just living together.
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, that was just an unthinkable thing for a man and a woman to carry on out of wedlock. Just, if they did it, we didn't talk about it because it was an unthinkable thing. And people were ashamed. People were discreet. All right, well, of course I was a kid too, so maybe they weren't as discreet as I thought they were, but I sure was sheltered from it. And we don't even blink. And I mean, I'm the same. I'm not criticizing anybody, but we don't blink anymore at people, living as man and wife and not being married. I don't think it's an accidental thing. I think that mankind is trying to break away from God. They're trying to actualize and be powerful and do what they want to do. And so I think it may be one of those things, Song of Songs, in that way. Like there are many things I'm thinking Revelation, that are not all that practical day to day in our Christian walk. They don't. Revelation doesn't teach us a lot about how to get up and go about this afternoon. But it plays a very important role at some point. At some point, I think Revelation will almost become a guidebook for Christians. When the end comes, it will be what sustains us and gives us hope. And can you imagine the people that are not raptured? And that maybe I don't fully know. I don't think that all Christians will be raptured. Some will. But can you imagine how important Revelation will be, how significant it will be at that time? And maybe as we get closer to that point, there's going to be more and more. I mean, there are people that just say that marriage is a bad thing and marriage is a form of slavery and et cetera, et cetera. That it's much better. There are people that endorse, they say, they take the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. And they say that usually this is a group of, well, I'm speaking out of school. I'm not really informed in that kind of thing, but basically that women should raise the children without men being a part of it. Is a popular theory you hear. Now, men have to play their role at the beginning, but then men are released from raising the children because men are a bad influence on children. So anyway, I believe that there's going to be more and more attacks on traditional marriage. And I believe it's a foundational thing. And maybe Song of Songs has been almost embedded in the Bible as we get close to the end of times, for us to remember that it is good and it's okay and it's appropriate and it's not. We shouldn't be embarrassed when we say that human sexuality is meant to be between a man and a woman who are married to one another. It's not a standard that we made up. I think that's a standard that God, as He created us, this is healthiest for the man, this is healthiest for the woman, this is healthiest for the children. And I believe the statistics say that too. That children who are raised with a mother and father who are married are much more functional in society and much more well adjusted than people that are raised in a one-parent household, whatever the nature of it. I think it is a foundational thing, and so maybe God put this in there not to embarrass us at church, but for us to remind us that no, this wasn't an accident the way that things are, but it is an intentional thing, and that marriage is very important. Anything else? All right, well, let's stop there and say a prayer.